Access granted.
Subject: Interview with Alex Russo. Body: on 11/7/2023, Christopher McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80, was tasked with the mission of interviewing ex-HASBRO G.I. Joe legend Alex Russo about his work on the brand back in 1986 all the way up to 2001. Here's what we could show you from that G14 classified recording.
Access granted.
Hello and welcome to the Full Force Redacted, brought to you by GeneralsJoesReborn.com with me, Christopher McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80. On the show today, we have an absolute G.I. Joe legend in the house. Ex-staff writer for Hasbro back in 1986 to 1991, and then again from 99 to 2001. He's now a full-time history teacher at North Attleboro High School in Massachusetts. That's a rather brief overview, but I'm sure Alex will be able to fill in all the gaps. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Alex. How are you doing, my good man?
Oh, not bad. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chris, for having me on. This is a thrill. I've never done a podcast before, so doing one on G.I. Joe is really close to home and very special.
That's awesome. Before we get started, Alex, I do remember seeing your name pop up way back when HasCon started. So when HasCon happened, it was the one and only convention they did, and all the legends turned up and everything. And I remember on 3D Joe's, your file card has been done by Carson and your face is on it and all your information and everything. So I was aware of your, obviously your contribution, but it's nice to finally meet you properly and talk about this stuff.
Well, thank you. Same here. Good to meet you too, Chris.
Right then, so I might as well get stuck into it then, I guess. It's always an absolute pleasure when we get to speak to G.I. Joe legends who were active on the brand in a significant capacity during a period of time beloved by the fandom. Before we get into that, though, let's start at the very beginning. What made you want to be a writer?
I kind of fell into it. I was originally the crazy thing is I originally was going to be a history teacher when I was in high school.
Oh, right.
And I got sidetracked with advertising and television, mostly television, radio, and I ended up going to Rhode Island College to major in communications. So I did that, and I knew basically trying to get into the field that experience would count a lot more than grades. I still got, thank God, really good grades in school, but I know the experience was key. So yeah, I ended up working at a local radio station in Providence called WLKW, which is an easy listening big band / radio station, but they were number one in the region for the market share back in the day. Before a lot of these places started putting on all the modern pop stuff, they used to have these regular easy listening kind of stations. So I ended up working in the sales department, which was just a way in. And I got interested in copywriting. And I went to the copywriting director and asked if I could learn how to do that, and found it interesting. And next thing, one thing led to another. I ended up switching out of the sales department and doing more radio copy. So I ended up writing 30-second spots, 60-second spots, which is really good. Yeah. And it gave me a lot of experience into advertising writing. So that is where it started out back in, that was the summer of 1982. So from that point on, I got hooked on the writing, the advertising, and then eventually, to make a long story short, one thing led to another. I graduated from Rhode Island College in 1985 with a degree in communications, and literally the day after my graduation, there was an ad posted in the Providence Journal for a writer for Hasbro.
Oh, so that's so cool.
So I applied to it, and the funny thing is I didn't get that one initially because one of the inside persons that worked in it, he had some writing experience, so he got in, but my boss was very interested and adamant about me staying in touch with her, so in case something else came up, and lo and behold, by September or so of 1986, a part-time position was made available, and she was able to get me in, which then that started the ball rolling. So I ended up working on all sorts of things. The first thing I actually worked on, I remember, it wasn't necessarily G.I. Joe, was actually, if you remember, Fortress Maximus for Transformers.
Oh, that's cool.
So I walked on, that was I'm looking at this 2-foot tall plastic monstrosity that she says, I want you to write the instructions for this. And I'm like, you want me to do what? So I'm like, sure. So that took enough time to work on that, but that started the ball rolling, and she got me into a number of other aspects in doing G.I. Joe, and I started writing a little more Joe. So by the summer of 87, the woman that was primarily the writer for G.I. Joe, Patricia Kiley, she was great. I mean, she was fantastic in how she wrote, the G.I. Joe, but she ended up leaving the company, and that's when my boss said, okay, Joe's going to be your toy line. So, but the thing with the company, I don't know if I saw your podcast with the modern writers, the modern people working on Joe. I'm not sure if they still do this. There's one fellow writer that's still there. I think she's approaching close to retirement. Her name is, if I can say it, Ann Martell. She's still at the company, I think.
I believe
she does
so.
My Little Pony, but the thing is, we all wrote everything. Like I was the principal writer, let's say, for Joe, but the guy that was the guy that got the job before me was primarily Transformers.
Right.
But we all did everything. We all jumped in and did. So he did some Joes. I did some Transformers. We all jumped in. Everybody did also. Even Ann wrote G.I. Joe when she did My Little Pony. And everybody did. So everybody did a bunch of everything, but we still had our own principal
right.
lines. Like I ended up being the principal writer for Joe. So
was it a little bit like? Was it kind of not unstructured necessarily, but was it a little bit? Because back then, I've heard stories of like the bullpen and things like that, and things of like where the team would kind of like, like work together, but like, mess about a little bit and shoot Nerf guns at each other and things like that. Was that kind of like, was that the vibe when you were there?
It was very light. I mean, I worked prior to Hasbro for a little while. I worked at an in-house advertising agency up in Canton, Mass, for Hills department store, which no longer exists. So, I mean, every day I had to walk in with a tie on. Didn't have to have a job, but a tie on. So I'm like, we're in the back of the building. I'm like, I go to Hasbro. I'm like, okay, bigger operation, multi-billion-dollar company, headquarters in Pawtucket. I'm walking in. How do you want me to dress? Well, however you want. I'm like, I'm walking in with jeans. There was one point in time somebody took a picture of me walking down the creative services corridor. I have jeans on and a T-shirt that says Brooklyn Dodgers. And here I am working at the corporate headquarters, and it's like, it was fun. It was very laid back, but we had our times. We had we have certain dress up days, as we call it.
Yeah.
So one day we dress up as. We come in with jackets and ties on just to freak everybody out. Oh, we had a Hawaiian shirt day.
Nice.
Or we do things like that once in a while to mix it up. But it was laid back in a way, and everybody did work together. But it was fun. It wasn't. Yeah. Today's a whole different animal. It's the 80s were definitely different than the modern era in terms of like how we were able to do things. I mean, my cubicle office, so to speak, you walked in, I had this massive, cardboard poster picture of the Nimitz. I mean, at the Nimitz, I had G.I. Joe stuff all over my office.
Right.
It was a lot of fun. We were able to do a number of things that some ways you can't really do today.
Sure. Were you like aware at the time how big a brand G.I. Joe was at that point? Were you kind of like, were you like aware of it? Was it on your radar, or was it something that kind of like it was just a job initially at first?
No, it was just I knew Joe was huge. I mean, they brought it back in '82 and with the 3.5-inch figures, and it was I knew it was a big deal. I think at some point in time when I had it, I don't know if it was 87 or 88 or whatever, it was like the number one toy in the world. So I knew it was a huge deal that I was writing a number of things for the line. It could be, let's say, the package copy, the instructions on how to put the vehicles and stuff together, a lot of times direct marketing pieces, the catalog copy for Toy Fair, sometimes licensing kits, whatever they wanted to do. So I remember one time, the four of us primarily sat down and said, well, what the heck do we actually do for this place? Like, how many different types of writing do we do? We came up with a number like 12 different types of advertising-oriented writing for the product lines, for the toy lines that we did. So, yeah, but G.I. Joe, it could be one of the most interesting things that happened one day was, I forgot exactly when it was 88, 87. They came up with, one of the vice presidents of Boys Toys wanted, and through an arrangement, I forgot what retailer or whatever, but they wanted a G.I. Joe handbook.
Right.
And it was like, they wanted what? So we had a G.I. In one day, everybody pulled together. Rob, all these writers I worked with, Ann Martell, Rob Martin, Carl Fritz, and my boss James Hughes, they were fantastic. I mean, these people were they were excellent professionals. They were excellent writers. Yeah. And one day Jane comes in and says, we have to what? We had to bang out a G.I. Joe handbook in a day.
That's amazing.
And it was like, you wanted to do, everybody wrote something to do with Joe on the handbook, and it was just, and we banged it out in a day, and we could, because like it was one of those times like all hands on deck. Yeah. They want this fast, and we did it in a day, and it was just like, oh my god, I still have a copy of it in my portfolio, and I'm like, I can't believe we actually did that in a day, and it was just, but they wanted it. The vice president loved it, and everything went pretty well. But that was one of the more interesting things that happened. Yeah, the company when it comes to like writing stuff, that was like, but as far as like, I can't remember what Joe I worked on first.
I was going to say, remember, yeah.
I don't. What I do remember, one of the lines I liked the most, you even had it when you were younger, was Tiger Force.
Oh, hell yeah. I love Tiger Force. Yeah, Tiger Force is a big it's a big love of mine, 100%. I love, even though it's like, there's a technically it's just a repainted figures and vehicles and stuff, but
oh yeah,
I don't know, it was something that just grabbed me, and I remember seeing it. I was on a trip in the US when I was very young, like kind of 89. And I remember going into the store and just seeing like walls of G.I. Joe figures, and it was unbelievable. Like, it was Action Force in the UK at the time, but
in the UK, yeah.
But when we'd go to the States, you'd see, he's like, well, I know what this is, but it's got a different name. That's weird. But I remember picking a couple of Tiger Force figures off the shelves and just being like, what are these? So I'm really stoked that you worked on Tiger Force in a big way.
Yeah, they did that. That was fun. I actually made sure, like, I started putting people's names on it, and at one point John came up, and a couple of other my best friend, I put his name on it. I put eventually my oldest son, when he was born in '89. I was there before I left. I put his name on a GI Joe. John, obviously, like I said, came up. I had a buddy of mine who was actually an Army lieutenant, was an officer, and I put his name on. So when I got the final press of it, when I got the final product, I sent them to him in Germany, and he ended up making. He and a buddy, I sent him a few of them, so he ended up making like they took them out of the package and they made makeshift parachutes and tossed them out of like the third, fourth floor.
Amazing.
On their base in Frankfurt. I'm like, you did what? So they had fun with the figures, but it was really fun writing the name. So then I got to a point where the engineers, some marketing people, they were asking me to make sure I put people's names on it that they wanted.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and R&D guys, the same thing. So I'm looking fine. So that's one good thing I liked that I kind of reflect to my students at the high school is, listen, I didn't work at some little small operation. I worked at a multi-billion-dollar corporate headquarters, and I worked with the legal department, marketing, engineering, R&D, model shop at times and I had a touch base with everything.
So it was quite a collaborative kind of thing for you. It was a whole team kind of coming together, I guess, at times. Did you have a lot of like close kind of conversations and stuff like that with the designers as well? Was that something that you were doing at the time?
Not quite. I would get to the designers once in a while if I had to ask them a question about something, if there was any particular thing they did. Usually I dealt with the product managers, engineering, definitely engineering, because they're the ones who actually made the toys and whatnot work. So that was interesting. I would sit down with the engineers and they would tell me about, let's say, Rolling Thunder. Rolling Thunder, I got that. So Rolling Thunder, how that works, or maybe again.
And you would write kind of like copy that you see on the packaging and everything as well for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and the instructions, if the engineers would give it to me in engineering ease, and I would have to translate it into advertising ease so regular people can shift this, regular people can do it, and then when I get the copy back, then I go to the department, and then everything had a process of being approved, and then working with the creative services department with the artists. That was amazing. What those people could do was absolutely amazing, especially the illustrators. They were like, I'd stand there and look at the illustrators and go, how do you even do this? I mean, it was just amazing. So it really was a whole team effort to produce the toys so that you could enjoy them and see it to the final result.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm fully appreciative of all of the work that went into those, because, like, again, this line, it's a bit of an obsession. Let's not make any bones about this. Like, I have my own podcast about this, so it's an obsession.
There's another guy who wrote. I apologize, I forget his name, but he wrote a couple of books on the lines of G.I. Joe lines and invited us out for dinner and things like that, like a few years back. So he lives in Arizona.
Dan Klingensmith.
Dan's a great guy. So Dan, he wrote books, so he invited us so we could say, I got a copy of one of the first editions, and it's really something. I mean, is it fun to see, like, because on those books, I have those, but I'm good friends with Dan, and all those books that he's done, the Creating G.I. Joe ones. Is it interesting to see effectively your workflow broken down like that and shown like this, and things like the idea was to do this at this point, and this is how the figure turned out, and all that kind of stuff? Yeah. He has more. The funny thing is, he has a lot more insight into how the things came about than I did. Because I mean, I would sit there and we would have these things called line reviews. Yeah. So I would go to a line review that could like in March, right? And I would look and see what the line is coming up for this coming year, and see what is going to be on the shelves of Christmas for December.
Wow. And
see what I'm going to be working on in the succeeding months. But I mean, as far as how it all put together, Dan had more of a connection with some of these guys. But like I said, with HasCon, I got to see a bunch of people I hadn't seen in
Yeah,
years.
that must have been
And
great.
it was absolutely wild seeing a lot of some of these people that I kind of worked with or I knew of, that like the big guns like Kurt Bazicki and all those guys. I remember seeing the big guns, and then other people I worked with in the engineering department of engineering or marketing. And like I said, it was great. It was reconnecting with them again. So, but yeah, Dan had he had more of an inside track on how these things all came to me than I did. So
Yeah,
I would just get, this is what we're doing. Okay, here's the copy. When you need the copy by, and play with the toys, and then go from there.
he's got. I mean, yeah, he's got a lot of insight in that kind of stuff. Dan,
Yeah,
yeah,
huge. He did. He's done a.
yeah.
I'm sorry. He's done a great job on those books.
Oh yeah, he really has. Yeah, good shout out to Dan as well. Yeah, he'll be watching. Don't you worry. I'll make sure he does. I do have to say, you did mention John a second ago, and I should fill people in on that particular story. So it's quite funny how this particular connection between myself and Alex has come about, guys. Now, John has said I can say his name, so I'm going to say it. But he's our realtor. John Blanchett is our realtor, right? And Kate and I have been in the process of buying a house. We're coming to close very soon, so everything's looking good. But anyway, we were doing a walkthrough of the house. We're in the basement. Kate and I were talking about where we're going to put our collection and stuff like this. And John just happened to say, "Oh, what do you collect?" And we explained that we were both G.I. Joe nerds. And we'd met at a G.I. Joe convention, and John just said out of the blue, just completely nonchalantly, "Oh, I'm a G.I. Joe." And we went, "What?" So then that opened the can of worms of like, I've got this podcast and yada, yada, yada. And John was like, yeah, Alex Russo was a good friend of mine, and he ended up putting my name on Topside. So if you go now, go check out 3D Joes or yojo.com. You'll see the Topside figure. You'll see John Blanchett as the file name. Take us through the whole process of that. How did that come about specifically, Alex?
Yeah, it was funny with John. There's some things I'm going to kind of leave out for politeness, so to speak. But John asked me at one point, because could you put my name on a Joe? I go, no. John, back in the day, was, I mean, if the guys are there, he was a bust. John could be a joke. John was funny.
Yeah,
he's probably still is. He's kind of a little bit older now. We're in
he's
pushing 60. I mean, I'm already 60, but I mean, back then in the 80s, yeah, it was fun. I told him, I said, I'm telling you right now. I said, I can get your name on a job, but I'm telling you right now, I am not going to write a serious bio for you. I'm going to do something to tweak you up, and I'm going to basically do something to tweak you up worldwide. I said, you've got to keep in mind. I said, John, what I'm doing for Joe, particularly Joe, gets translated in multiple languages and goes all over the world. I says, I am not going to give you a straight bio. So when the bios comes in from Marvel Comics, I kind of adjusted them a little bit. And some things you can say on a comic book, you can't say on a package. There's different legalities apply.
Right.
So, but I did say some things to bust them up a little bit. So when the time came and the final product was there, and I gave it to John. I'll never forget the look on his face. He just sat back. He looked at it. I go, read the bio. He read the bio, and his reaction was, and back then he had a beard. His hair, he literally went like this. He went like this with his head. He goes, I can't believe you did this. And I said, I told you.
Amazing.
I was not going to write a straight bio for you. I was going to do something to tweak you up a little bit.
I'm not going to read the whole thing out, but I do want to highlight the Hogmaster title that you get. That's hilarious. So yeah, you guys can enjoy that. You can enjoy that in your own time, reading that in the background. That's hilarious. But no, that's so funny. And yeah, obviously having known John now for a short period of time, but it's you can definitely see there's a really, really awesome personality there. Like, we've had a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
He's been really great
John.
as well. Like, he's been awesome for us so far. We've had a great experience with John. So
John's a great guy.
But it's just so funny that, like, out of all the realtors, out of all the people we could get, it was the guy who became a G.I. Joe thanks to your pen, as it were, Alex. That's amazing.
That was fun. That was
amazing.
Fun. Yeah, I mean, my best friend's he's had a Joe. He had his figure for a while hanging in a hangman's noose from his car rear mirror. It was just like, what are you doing? He was prepared. He goes, in case I get stopped by the cop. He already had the file card in his glove compartment. He was going to whip the guy's registration and license. He was going to give him the file card.
That's amazing.
You're going to do what? So yeah, it was fun being able to do that. People's names on it, and it's really wild. There's some interesting topics, some things too. Like we used to come up with way back then when I started, we had like for the GI Joe's Social Security numbers. So
Oh,
I would just sit
right.
there making numbers up, just make the numbers up, right? Well, a couple of times we actually, if you notice the later versions from the late '80s or very late '80s into like '90s, I left in '91, the numbers are different
Yeah.
because a couple of the numbers I literally came up with off the top of my head come down to be hits for real ones. So the
Wow.
legal department would say, "You can't. We got to change this. Like, what? What do you actually hit a couple of real numbers? Are you serious?
Does
I'm
that
sitting and
mean
making up numbers.
does that mean
Right? It's like,
someone got the figure at some point and went, "Hang on, that's my social security number." Is that how that's found
well,
out?
the legal department looks at everything, no
Oh,
matter
I
what we
see.
write and what we do. They proof everything to
Right.
make
So
sure no conflict.
search. Yeah.
They spotted it long before they we're gonna
That's
change the number.
brilliant.
Why would we change the number? I said, okay, so I'll change the number. We came up with a different system for that. But yeah,
Yeah.
a couple of times I hit real social security numbers and I'm like, no, I can't. That's illegal. So we gotta change how we do this for
That's
GI Joe.
brilliant. That
I'm
is
like, okay,
absolutely
no
brilliant.
problem.
What would something I'm really like interested in is like back in the 80s, specifically that 80s period that you were in, where GI Joe was like the top seller and everything. What was like a normal day? What did a normal day look like for you, or was it like one of those things where you go in and something is different every single day?
It was trying to remember. It was you knew there was like I forgot the name for it. There was like a schedule, a planning schedule from like literally soup to nuts. When the idea would come up for the product, every little bit of the product or whatever is going from soup to from this beginning to the very end had a due date. So I would look at my copy due dates and see what's coming up
Yeah.
and trying to remember what it was like. It's a little bit difficult, but I do remember saying, okay, I would have a schedule or something of certain products, whether it be I got to write this Transformers type of thing, or I have to do Cops or Battle
Oh,
Force or something. I'd have to
yeah.
write something. Whatever it might be. There's a Visionaries was another.
Visionaries is another
That
one.
was my
Oh,
first toy line I worked on in October of 1986.
dude.
Was Visionaries.
Visionaries is
So
amazing. I love
that was why
Visionaries.
with the holograms, because I remember the
Yeah.
holograms were a big deal back then, so they incorporated that in the toy. But
Did you
working
have
on
to
that,
did you have to put your like medieval British kind of hat on to kind of get, because honestly some of the copy for the Visionary stuff is beautiful. It's very written in that kind of, I don't know, that format, because it's like knights in a sense, isn't it? It's kind of
it
like
was
that
nice.
feeling.
And I had to get used to it. Like I said, my boss had a lot of input on something to get me like Hasbro like in the writing. So, but she guided me and I tweaked things up, and so she did a lot. So there's a lot of things like, that's why she's the editor. She was the copy editor.
Yeah.
She was great. I mean, Jane Fusco was fantastic. She really helped hone in my writing and helped develop it even more than it ever did before. So
Brilliant.
getting all that down and the nuances and what to say, and it was really fun writing that kind of stuff. But yeah, as a day, it's just like what am I doing today? I probably had a list on my desk of certain things I had to write, or what's coming due that has to get done, because
Yeah, all the
whatever I write
priorities. Yeah.
exactly has to go through her. If she liked it or revised it or edited it, or I did that, then it would eventually go to marketing. Marketing had to approve it, which again they had the final say. From there, it would get back to me, and then it would go through the process of the art department eventually, and go from there. But yeah,
Yeah, I
it
guess
was
they have
just,
to they have to put the graphics then, don't they, on the packaging, I guess. So that is
Oh, yeah.
one of those things where everything has to be like perfect. And did you ever have any typos in any of your stuff that got through?
Any what? I'm sorry.
Typos, like errors,
Oh
mistakes.
yeah, oh yeah. That was the hardest thing of all. It was like, I mean, there were times I missed some things, like I misspelled the word like it's, and I tell my students this the same thing. Again, a lot of things I learned from being a writer that I bring to the high school kids and what things are like. And I said, listen, one thing I remember Jane telling me is when you're writing something, you're looking something over. She goes, your head knows what's on that paper, so your eyes are just going to fly. You'll
Yeah.
definitely miss something. But if you
Yeah.
give it to somebody else, they don't know what's on that paper, so they'll
Yeah.
be a bit more attentive and pay, right there. Some things I miss a couple of words or whatever, which got to be a problem, because then it was like, now they got to go back, and especially if it's on a mechanical rendering is one thing. But when you get to a point, you miss it, you don't see it, and it gets to film, now we have a problem. Now it's
Right.
like, so now it costs money to change the film and go back. So, but that sometimes it does happen. You do miss some things all the time. You're dealing with words all day long. So, I mean,
Yeah.
but writing, it was fun just sitting there trying to come up with a backstory, like those little stories on the back of the package like what's going on for Cobra, Tiger Force, Destro, Cobra Commando, whatever it might have been. GI Joe, that was fun. The bios were a little bit different because you had the basic information for Joe, and then you had a quote by Duke. You
Yeah.
know, GI Joe, Duke would give you the quote, and lots of times I made that up, or I would spin off of Marvel Comics. But it was fun. Like I said, but regular days, just you get there and you write. It's not all day.
Yeah.
So lots of times I'd have meetings. I'd have to go to engineering or go to marketing and sit down with somebody in marketing. So it wasn't like I was writing all day long. It
Right.
was kind of broken up.
And what I was going to say as well with the writing is it did you prefer to do the kind of character based stuff where you're kind of creating little stories and fun little things like that, or was it sometimes a bit easy for you just to kind of be writing something very simple like an instruction or a call out or something? What was your preferred kind of writing style when it came to doing those things on all those different figures?
Doing the package copy. The instructions are like very right
Yeah,
down
very.
that you can't. And
Yeah.
I even got to the point even after I wrote the instructions for a number of things, and I would get the final product to say put in my office or something like that. I did what everybody else did. I looked at the pictures, and I wrote the copy, the instruction. I looked at the pictures because that's what mostly everybody does. But you still had to make sure that the instructions were clear enough and understandable enough for the public to actually, work with and do it. But I mean, I used to do it everything. But the creative aspect is that was the more fun to come up with, say, something to do with Destro or something to do with say a vehicle or a GI Joe Jeep or something. Rolling Thunder, what it's like to try to come up with something that would go with that. It's the same thing with Transformers. And Carl, like I said, he was like the Transformer god. He was fantastic when it came to Transformers. He did a great job on Joe as well, but when it came to Transformers, he was it. But everybody, Jane had us doing everything. So
Yeah.
I even wrote several My Little Pony pieces.
Amazing.
And I was like, I can't do that. I told her one time, I said, I'm okay, fine. I have to get back to Blood, Guts, and Gore. I got to get back to Joe. That's exactly what I told her. I said, I got to get back to Joe. I said, this is way too flowery, ballerina, hearts and flowers stuff. I'm like, no, I can't. It's way too pretty. I said, give me Destro, give me Cobra Commander, something.
Give me stuff exploding. Yeah,
something's gonna explode or whatever. Yeah, that was fun.
One thing as well, like obviously Larry Hama was known for doing a lot of the kind of obviously the comics and a lot of the early file cards and stuff. Was that another person that you had contact with in terms of what you were doing on the file cards? Was there ever any crossover there with you and Larry?
No, not at all. I knew of Larry, and I would know of Larry through Jane, so she recognized him because she was at the company several years before I got in there. And I mean, Kurt Bazigian knew it because Kurt was a copywriter. So I take a little more between her and Kurt. I took far more serious as if they thought something was good, then it was good. I mean, these people knew exactly what they were doing. They were consummate professionals, especially Jane. She was she could be a tough taskmaster, but in the sense that she knew what to do, what we needed to do. And she was very, as far as bosses is concerned, she was literally one of the best supervisors in my entire full-time career since I got out of college. One of the best ones I've ever had, literally. And inspirational to say the least. She, like I said, I tell my students that if I had a boss that, if she said this was good, she just didn't put it down for the hell of it. It had to be good. She's not just going to write that down for nothing. So the funny thing is when I came back in 1999, things were a bit different for Joe.
Yeah, I was going to say, that must have was that like a big change then, like between those periods? Yeah, was it different in the office as well? Was was Hasbro different at that point?
It was a bit different. Well, it was weird because a number of people that I worked with had left. A couple of people still there. Other people, new people came in. Obviously, the company was a slightly different vibe than when I was there in the 80s. I had left in 91, to tell you, the viewers, I left in 91 to get my graduate degree in history so I could become a teacher. I decided I wanted to change careers and actually go back to my original career objective. But in trying to find a job in Rhode Island, which was very difficult to do, I ended up still am a college professor. I'm an adjunct professor at CCRI and for a while at Johnson & Wales University. So teaching that and trying to still break into the educational field in Rhode Island was very difficult to do. So I got to one point in 98 where I asked Jane, so what are the possibilities of me possibly coming back? Because I keep knocking on the door and nothing. So it was very competitive back in the 90s to get a history job in Rhode Island. I said, so let me go back to what I did at Hasbro. She said, I would definitely have to take you back. That'd be great. So eventually in 99, I ended up going back to the company as a part-time, basically assistant editor of sorts for her, which was what I basically decided. But G.I. Joe was different. Now we're dealing with And she loved the fact because the kind of Joes we were dealing with in '99 were all historical based. So it would be like, I still have it downstairs in my cellar, the Mercury astronaut with John with
Right.
the big write up on the back. I did all that. So she loved the fact that, okay, Alex has a degree in history, and
Yeah.
we're doing a lot of realistic kind of Joes, German troops or
Yeah, it was
soldiers
the
from
it
the
was the kind
Korean
of like
War.
12-inch
The
kind of
12-inch
reissue
guys,
kind of things, wasn't it? Yeah, yeah, totally.
exactly. But a lot of it was historically based. So she was able to tap into like, okay, Alex, I did the research to find out, to do a write up on, say, a Japanese imperial soldier and what they were
Right.
like. So everything was kind of like really authentic. So that was good. So I get to do the research and do the write ups. It could be George Washington. It could be
Right.
General Patton. It could have been all these different types of things we did back in the '90s. So that worked out pretty well. And then I eventually got a full time teaching job, and it got to be too much. I was working at another school, somewhat else, like an alternative kind of school in Pawtucket. So doing that full time, leaving school and doing some time at Hasbro, and then teaching at the college level, I'm like, it got to be time wise, it got to be way too much. So by March or February 2001, I left Hasbro as a writer and focused more on education. And eventually, luckily for me, in August, September of 2001, I got my full time job at North Attleboro High School, which I've been at ever since and loving it. But
Yeah.
Hasbro was like, it was really, like I said, the change from the '80s with the 3.5-inch figures to the 11.5-inch figure. The funny thing was, before I left in '91, there was one Joe I had to work on. It was Duke. It was 11 3/4 inch Duke.
A Hall of Fame
And
one, I think. Yeah, yeah.
a Hall of Fame one. Exactly.
Yeah.
That was the first one they brought back because they were doing something for, back then, we're like, they're doing some promo for some store named Target.
Yep.
We did back then, we didn't have Target around here. So it was out in the Midwest somewhere. So they were doing a big promo, and I had to do this write up of G.I. Joe, the history of G.I. Joe in a back panel. I'm like, you want me to write a history of G.I. Joe that covers like 30 years, and you want it in a back panel? And I crushed it and did what I could. But that was the first one that I still have one of those downstairs in my cellar. And
Yeah.
it talked, you push a button on the back and he said, "Yo Joe," or something like that. So that was the first. So that started the whole, we're going to bring back the 11 3/4 inch half to 11-inch figures back in '91.
Were you as a kid? Was the 12-inch GI Joes? Was that something that you played with? Was that something that you had? Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I had one back in the mid '70s. I had a GI Joe, and I wish I didn't destroy it. It's like we all did. We destroyed it. The thing
It's
was,
love though,
money.
isn't it? Do you know, yeah, it's love though, isn't it? You know, like you want to play with it and you want to enjoy it, and it just gets used.
It was fun. It did get used instead of like, we didn't know any better. Like if we had known better, like really crafty, would have probably keep it in like Sheldon Cooper on The Big Bang. To keep it in the box. It's gonna be worth money. Don't ruin it. It's like, yeah, I had no. I was 12, 13 years old when I got a Joe, so I'm like, no, I didn't think anything of it.
That's amazing. Was there, out of all of the brands that you worked on, was there a favourite one that you had? Because obviously we've talked about Visionaries, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Cops was one you mentioned, and another one that I think you have worked on, Bucky O'Hare.
Oh god, yeah, Bucky O'Hare was crazy.
Because that's another Larry adjacent,
Yep.
Larry Hama adjacent property as well. So yeah, which one
that
was?
My favorite was G.I. Joe. I mean, just because, not just but my favorite of all was G.I. Joe. Working on Joe was like really something, because to be able to say at one point I'm working on the #1 toy in the world at that point in the late '80s, that was something. So that was a lot of fun working on Joe, and I used to tell people working at Hasbro as a creative writer and that, because I got paid to lose my mind. Is basically what it was. I got paid to lose my mind. I got all creative stuff, and dealing with all that was a lot of fun to work on, Joe. And dealing with all the different people was really, it was good, because I got to see what everybody's role was in putting all of this together.
Yeah,
and it was really something to see.
That's awesome.
But Joe was definitely by far my favorite.
I kind of interrupted you, and you were about to say something about Bucky O'Hare. What were you going to say about Bucky?
It was just weird. I mean, it was when that came out, like, that was just, writing that copy was just like, what in God's name it was just crazy. Between that, Cops was interesting.
Yes.
There was another one. Oh, do you remember Flying Fighters?
Yeah, Flying Fighters.
I worked on that. That was fun. That was like my first real, at that time in the late '80s, like delving into some really, like, doing research on actual combat, fighter units. So awesome. Navy, Marines, whatever. So that was pretty cool doing that. I had a couple of those. planes as well, and it was interesting. So my sons never really were benefited from dad working at a toy company, because by the time they were old enough to appreciate it, I was long gone. I was a teacher. I was on my way to becoming a teacher, so they couldn't really take advantage of it. But yeah.
Did you get anything from Hasbro? Like, I don't mean like the company kind of gave you something. I mean, like, did you keep things from like your time at Hasbro? Like, whether it be like kind of like, you know, kind of like the kind of pre-production stuff that you kind of worked on and things like that?
Some things, like I would get the final product sometimes that were free. There were enough of them around, or I would go to the toy store and get a discount on the toy. You could buy some of there, or I would get like sometimes the press proofs of, like, say John's Topside. I don't have it, but say the press proof without just the actual card itself, with no figure, no plastic, nothing. It's just the card itself back and front. So I would get things like that.
That's cool.
I would get direct marketing pieces that I would be able to pick up. Some of the, like, again, some of the final field, like the not the copy, but the product, the back packaging themselves, so I can keep it for me and tuck it in a portfolio in case I needed it for something, or just mainly for me was posterity, just so I can keep this is some of the stuff I worked on.
Did you have a feeling that you'd be talking about this however many years later? Was there a thought there of it having, like, you know, you say holding stuff for posterity, but was there a thought that maybe, or was that just the history teacher in you keeping it? Do you know what I mean?
It was mainly just like in case, like you know, like a writer would build up like a portfolio of, this is the work I've done. So it got to me for a while, especially when I decided to go back to school to become a teacher. It was a matter of just keeping stuff like this. This is like a piece of history that I was involved with. That, you know, I had one student that really didn't believe that I actually did that.
Yeah.
And the kid's like, "How do you know Mr. Russo?" I said, "Okay, fine." I brought in the portfolio. Brilliant. I've never brought the portfolio into school in the 22 years I've been at the high school. I really never brought in the portfolio. So last year I brought in, the kids are like, "Whoa, you worked on?" Yeah, this is what I told you. This is what I did. So the kids like, wow, like they thought it was pretty cool to see these types of things that I did. So, and, you know, it was just a matter of this for posterity's sake, just keeping certain things like that, and, you know, that I was able to get my hands on, or there was extra one here, take that or whatever. So it was pretty cool. So I do have some stuff. I do have some stuff that I kept that I still had downstairs. And the HasCon thing really was interesting. Going to HasCon, that was I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, I've got you on. I believe I have you on camera as well. I was in the front row filming the panels and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
So I was doing it for me, but also for Dan. I'm really happy that we got all those panels recorded, because it was so amazing to hear you guys talk about all that stuff from back in the day, and Vinny Dearlever being there, and
Vinny, Tom Bowman,
Guy Cassaday, Guy Cassaday was there, and there's just so many legends. Dave Kunitz and
I some of these guys I have on Facebook or in connected. Dave Kunitz, I have Bob Swanson. Bob's another Bob Swanson's another one. I got Kurt Bazigian. I got Dan, obviously, but it's like, it was fun. We didn't think anything. We just thought it's a job. This is what we do.
Kurt Groan as well was there, and I'm just trying to think of all everyone that was like. There was a lot of people, and I keep forgetting Mark Pennington. I want to make sure. I want to make sure I name all the people that I remember were there. I feel bad otherwise.
No, it's. Are you kidding me? It's a lot of names. Some people I know indirectly. Some people I work directly. Like my wife took a picture of myself and Patty. I hadn't seen. Hadn't seen Patty and so I haven't so long for years. I haven't seen her. So she took a picture of the two of us. So it was pretty wild seeing her. She does something different now, but Pat Kiley, she was great. Like I said, she was really she was a top-notch writer for Joe. She was fantastic. So I learned a lot from her in how to position, do certain things too. So it took time to get a handle on how to do things. But once you get it down, you'll be able to do things a little bit better. You still make mistakes. That's what I did, and I made plenty. Don't get me wrong. but it was fun. With the lines.
I'm going to go through all of your work that I've ever found. I'm going to write little red notes in it, and I'm going to send it to you with a grade on. I'll be your teacher on this one.
That'll be cool. You probably can, Delph. You remember more than I do.
That's not true. One last thing before we go, Alex. I'd love to know if there was one G.I. Joe kind of that you worked on that stands out to you. And we put Topside. We're not having Topside. John Blanchette's had too much shout outs on the show today. But no, if you could. Is there any character that you worked on that you really have a lot of love for, like that you love what you wrote for them, that kind of thing? Was there any like that stand out to you?
Let's see, my oldest son was interesting to put him on a G.I. Joe. The problem is I couldn't have him be born in Providence. He had to be born. Kurt called me in and said, Alex, you have a lot of people born in Rhode Island. I said, well, people are going to know where Rhode Island is, right? So he goes, no, you switch it up. He said, just switch it up a little bit. So I had to make my son born in San Francisco.
Amazing.
And that wasn't random because when he was about a little less than a year old, my wife at the time, we went to California for a relative with the godparents for my cousin's, one of her twins. So, and they lived in San Jose, which we went to San Francisco. Right. So I said Michael's born in San Francisco because he actually went out there, so he was born in San Francisco. So not to sound. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What character was that? Do you remember?
What was his? I can't remember what his was. My oldest son, I think, was named. I think it was like Dojo. One of them was Dojo.
Oh yes, you're right. So it was Ninja Force Dojo, wasn't it?
Yeah, Ninja Force Dojo.
I was trying to think of who. Was born in San Francisco, and I think one of the Ninja Force characters.
One of the Ninja Force was Michael, and then my youngest son, Danny, I got on a later Joe.
Michael P. Russo.
That's him. Yeah,
there he is, San Francisco, California. San Francisco. Brilliant.
Yep,
that's brilliant.
Yeah, I had to do something. My youngest one, when I got back in the company in '99, at some point I put him on. They started bringing back. You probably remember some of the 3.5-inch figures, but they doubled them up in a package.
2-packs, yeah.
The 2-packs. So they redid some of the bios. I was able to modify some of the bios. I put my son Danny on another one of those. I can't remember his figure's name. I probably have it downstairs, and I gave him one too. So I have him on figure's name. So it was. I'm
going to be searching. I'm going to be searching every figure on yojo.com when I get back, just looking for these names. Going, that's amazing.
So his would be like Daniel Alexander or Alexander Daniel. We've had to switch things up a little bit for him. I forget where he was born, but that was later on. So I probably got away with putting him in Providence. I can't remember.
That's amazing. It was funny though, the amount of characters that were all out of Rhode Island. When you look at a map of all of the birthplaces of all of the characters, there's this huge concentration right in the top.
That's me.
Right.
A lot of it's me.
That's amazing.
It was fun. Smithfield, or who was born in Cranston, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was fun. But if I had to pick that one character, not to sound, I don't want to. It's not conceited, but it's like the one I remember the most was I finally, after for the longest time, was able to put myself on a G.I. Joe character. And I did. So I made something. No, I'm going to do something a little bit different. All these guys are enlisted personnel. Well, they made a lieutenant. Screw it. I made myself a lieutenant colonel. I graduated from the Air Force Academy. I was the pilot of, I think it was the Tiger Rat. My guy was
Sky Striker.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
So I'm saying, you know what? I'm putting everybody's name on this thing. I keep forgetting. I'm going to put myself on one.
Is your name on the box? Is it written on the thing?
It might be.
Like as in on the artwork, where the pilot sits in the seat. Yeah,
in the seat. I don't know if it's on the plane, but it may be like that was, I think, a product in which you had the actual, like, the figure in part of. He came with the product. He came with the vehicle, and underneath it may have had his name. I think. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at the box now. I just vaguely remember Russo seeing the. No, it's not on the actual box art, but yeah, that's cool, man. It's so cool that particular figure's got your name. That's
I put it on. I finally broke down and put myself on. I said, everybody wants my. I said, let me put. I've never put myself on a Joe. I said, everybody else. I just, what the heck? Let me do this. I got away with it. So
Providence, Rhode Island as well. Perfect.
I was born. So
is that your social security number? Then I'll just use that and.
Yeah, no, I probably made it up. It's probably something I made up because I can't remember. It's so long ago. I probably did that back in '88.
That's
88, 89 for Tiger Force. So, yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was. It's one of those things where I thought of it over the years. Said if I could have a chance to become a teacher out of college, maybe a year or 2 or 3 years out of college, and be at a point now the way I am, be able to literally probably be able to retire comfortably, or go to stay through the Hasbro. I'm like, no, I learned a lot from working at the company. It was a lot of fun working at the company back then. We all had a good time. It was still a job. But like I tell the kids, you worked at, but it was advertising. We still had the deadlines, due dates, everything was right there. You had to get things done. It was corporate. You're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars at least at a time for certain things, and you had
Yeah.
to get it off. So you had fun writing, and we had fun doing it, but it was still a job. You still had to be
Stressful as
stressful. You still had to get things done. And I remember one time there was something to do with Joe, and I told my students about the importance of due dates. I'm like, well, Phil Arndt, who was a great artist at the, he had Joe, and he's waiting for my copy, which had to be approved by the marketing department. The marketing
Yeah.
department was so one of the product managers, I'll blame nameless, who was fine. He's on, I think it was like Hong Kong or Singapore, and I'm like, I said, that's it. Phil's on my back. They need the copy.
Right.
And I didn't get called, got on the phone, called them where they were in Singapore. I said, listen, you got to not realize, completely forgetting that 12 o'clock our time in the afternoon is 20 after 12 their time in the morning. They're 12 hours ahead of us. So they were still awake. I said, listen, Phil's on my back. You got to approve this copy. So even then it was like, this doesn't stop.
That's amazing.
And this is long before the cell phones came popular, long before any sort. When email came out, we thought that was fun to play with. That was new back in the early 90s, so we thought that was fun to play with. I mean, just when I was working at a time when the fax machine was new, and now like doing something like that was innovative.
God, that must have made that's opened another bunch of questions. But yeah, that must have made the process so much harder back in the 80s, having to, like get that information to the factories in in the Far East and
they
stuff
had to
like that.
probably had to fax it all. Like we had one between the 5 writers, Jane, Rob, Carl, Anna, myself. We didn't have at that time our own individual like LaserJet printer. No, we had a printer, a dot matrix printer that literally, I'm not kidding. It sounded like, it was in its own room because it was sounding like machine gun fire. So you shut the door, you can see this. It's like you could hear it. And that was, so anything we did went right through and out of the perforated paper. I still have something with the perforated edges to be able to tear that off to give the cop. It's
old school.
It's not
Love
like
it.
today.
Love it.
Today's like crazy. It's like, it's so better today. It's not even funny.
I know, it's just like a WhatsApp group, or it's like, a message immediately to someone on the other side of the world and back again.
We didn't have that.
Video conferencing, calling you right now at this moment in time in 2 different places.
This would have been unthinkable.
Exactly. It's crazy. I think that's something that it's definitely, it's lost a little bit because you just don't think about that stuff. You just thought, like, you just got the toys when you were a kid and you're just like, these are amazing. Not realizing there's like 2 or sometimes more years of development that went into that one figure in your hand. Yeah, it's insane.
And they would develop, the line reviews were fun because the line reviews I would call in, like Jane would go, because she was head of the department. So she would see through the whole thing, whether it be girls' toys, boys' toys, play school, whatever it might be. But if like she would come back, like, so Carl would say, go to watch the Transformers. It's mainly that he was the main writer for Transformers. So he would see Transformers. So then I would go and say, Jane's okay, tell Alex he's going to come for G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe's going to be, and I'd sit there and watch. It was absolutely wild to see. We called this area at Hasbro the Terrordrome.
Oh,
just like
brilliant.
we told the Terrordrome what the auditorium was, because we would sit in the back. There would be like product managers or salespeople, whatever, and then you'd have a table on the floor with so many people on it. And then R&D and marketing would come and present. Now, sometimes I would catch it where you'd have Kurt would be there in the panel, Bazigian. You'd have the president of Boys Toys. I forget where it was. Sometimes Stephen Hassenfeld.
Wow.
So once in a blue, Hassenfeld was there. You saw Hassenfeld there. I'm like, okay. Sometimes later on, it was Alan after Stephen died. But you see Stephen, it's like, okay. So I just sat there and I would take down notes like what's coming up, and I would be like, wow, what they would come up with for a toy was that most of the times different than when I got to it, because the cost engineers would knock it down because it would cost too much to do certain things, or the legality point, you can have a projectile that would fly like 7 feet, and it's like, no, we can't have that.
That's going to take an eye out. And
I get all frustrated when I'm looking at this stuff. Like, you're taking all the fun out of the toy. It's like, I could go nuts with this. But I understand why, though. I mean, there's all sorts of rules and things you had to follow. But again, it's R&D and marketing selling the toy, whatever it might be, to the big guns sitting in front to say, this we want to do. Do we have your okay or not? So and they would sit back, and they would talk about the cost and this and that, and I would just sit there just looking at what's coming up and making little notes or whatever, just to see what it lies in store for me in the future.
That's
So
freaking
it
awesome.
was fun though. I
Yeah.
got to say it was fun. I mean, I got to know a lot of different people. Once in a blue moon, I'll go back to the company, um, and I'll see like Ann Martell. Ann's the only other writer that's still there, and she's pushing to the point she's going to retire soon, I think. Because Glenn Cooper was another one. God, we'll see, like not a cost engineer, but he was an engineer there. So some people, very few, are still there. That when I was there, they're still there, but very, very few. So it's really it's different. It feels weird.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm definitely past my time there. It was fun. I can't imagine doing it today, how different it
Oh yeah.
actually is. With everything is online, it's very different today. I don't think I would feel comfortable doing it,
Right.
because
Right.
I'd have that memory from 33, 34 years, 35 years ago, and to jump into this whole modern
Yeah,
era
it would
of
be weird.
computers and digital
Yeah.
and like, no,
That's
no.
amazing. Well, Alex, dude, thank you so much for doing this interview. It's been so much fun just talking and chatting about all these all the different things that Hasbro was like back in the day, and all the people you work with, and all of the different products and stuff. It's been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. This has been a real kick for me. So it's always fun. It's always a lot of fun talking, Joe. So I'm glad you're doing what you're
Absolutely.
doing and keeping it alive. And I appreciate everything you're doing. And thank you very much. It's
Oh,
been a
not
pleasure.
at all, man. Thank you. We'd love to have you back on in the future if you're up for it. Just
That's fine with me.
because I'm
Yep.
sure there are loads more stories you can tell. There's loads more stuff we can get stuck into, mate. Like I said, it's been a pleasure. And shout out to John Blanchett again for setting us this
Yep.
up.
Yeah, thanks to John. Yep.
Still can't believe that. That's such a small,
That's weird. That
small
is a bit-
world thing.
That is weird.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's it for this installment of the Full Force Redacted. Thank you to my wonderful guest, G.I. Joe legend Alex Russo. See you next time. And as always, by the way, I didn't tell you about this, but you have to say Full Force at the end after 3. Are you ready to do this, Alex?
Yes.
Are you good to? Okay. After 3, I mean, I'm not sure if you saw the end of an episode, but I usually yell it like Yo Joe.
You want me to yell it?
Do
I'll
it,
yell it.
man. Yeah. After 3, you ready? What? It's Full Force, by the way. 1, 2, 3.
Full force!
Force! Perfect.
Access granted.
Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on Twitter @TheFullForce, liking the Facebook page facebook.com/TheFullForce, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on either of those platforms with feedback and questions. We also have a Patreon page, so if you want to show your support for the show, see your name up in lights on these videos, or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/TheFullForce podcast, or click on the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force!
Access granted.